Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. I just wanted to make a short little screencast video for you to talk about some of the things that we're having a look at this week. It can seem a little bit overwhelming. The chapter 12 reading about social and moral world of a child is quite long and it has a fair bit in it. So you might want to break it down a little bit, or perhaps if you haven't read it yet, maybe do a little bit of pre-work to sort of get your mind ready before you start having a look at some of the theories in detail. So as you can see on the screen at the moment, I've got the DB post for this week up, which is basically asking us to get things ready for assessment 1. So hopefully you've already had a look at assessment 1, maybe you've even had a look at the flipped collab just to get your head around things, because we need to have an idea of what theory we're going to choose. Just because you choose one here on the DB doesn't mean that you need to use it for your assignment, but it's probably a good starting point or good practice for you to be able to link some of the learning theory to some of the overt behaviours. So we need to choose a learning theory. We need to post some of the responses below and make connections to the quote. So we're actually thinking about, why did you choose a quote? What is it about this quote that you like, or what resonates you, and which theory out of the list do you feel the quote aligns with and why? So we're making some connections between what's happening in the quote and the learning theories. Now, if you haven't done the reading yet, or even if you have, perhaps, I'm going to suggest that you also need to look a little bit further afield this week, and especially when you're trying to get your head around the theories themselves, because they can be quite not daunting, but I think it is sometimes good to have a look at some of other stuff that might state it in a simpler way, or just explain it in a quick little video or something like that, so that you can get your head around it before you do the reading and before you sort of think about which one you want to use for your assessment. So when I was trying to look for things that I thought were quite simple and just gave me a direct answer on, what is behaviorist theory, what is sociocultural theory, YouTube surprisingly was a great resource. So when I clicked on looking up humanism and looking up a few other things, I found this particular Khan Academy where it's probably explained more from a psychological standpoint, but she explains humanistic theory really well in this particular video here, and also goes through Maslow's hierarchy of needs really nicely in this video here. And it's amazing how much just watching this little 6-minute video and you go, oh, okay, that makes sense to me now. It's just sort of like a simple, clear way to sort of describe the basics of that particular theory, and then you can think about how you can relate it to education and how you can relate it to things that you see within the classroom. I think there was also, just going through, Khan Academy also had one on behavioral theory, which again talks about talks about some of the main factors within behaviorist theory as well, which is also pretty clear. I also really liked using this, I think it's called Blue Sofa Media, which talks about cognitism, and I think there was another one that they used as well. So if you can, get onto YouTube and have a look through some of these videos, it does make some of the theories, I think, just a bit more clear and easier to understand from the offset, because that chapter 12 of the learning materials is quite detailed and it goes over so many different concepts. So if you can have an idea of the learning theories even before you start reading it, or maybe even after if you've already read it, some of those things are going to make a little bit more sense to you, because it talks about the idea of the stages of play that children go through, how important building of self-esteem and having a strong self-esteem means to children, and how that links to early attachment to caregivers and parents, and how if you have a secure and consistent attachment with at least one adult in your life, you are more likely to have a higher self-esteem and a higher ability to regulate your own emotions, therefore leading to I guess higher academic results, because that's where we're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Because if you have these sort of social inabilities, it's going to affect you in the classroom with your learning, and I think that's where we're trying to make the connection back to. It also talks a little bit about parenting, which is good because it gives you a background as to why these kids are coming to you with these different issues. While I'm here as well, just very quickly, as well as having a thinking about the quotes and having a think about the theories, it's not something that we need to do this particular week, but while I'm here, I thought I would just mention it, that within Assessment 1, we are looking at those two things, but we're also looking at policy and procedure, which if you may have done this unit before, it wasn't previously involved, so it's something new. I did talk a little bit about it in the Flip Collab, but I thought I'd just mention really quickly this week, because I've had a couple of questions about it, that we're using the quotes to be able to extract, excuse me, we're using the quotes to be able to extract specific learning, not learning difficulties, but more overt behaviours that we can see within the child. And then we're linking that to these theories that we're going to be choosing. And then, as teachers, we don't want to have these overt behaviours within the classroom, because they are affecting learning and of that particular child and of other children. So we have to be able to manage them, and we have to be able to deal with them, and we have to be able to, I guess, get that child to be able to regulate their own emotions and work within a classroom environment so that they can improve their own learning outcomes for themselves. So within the Australian curriculum, if I click on F to 10 curriculum, you'll notice over here that there's a section called personal and social capability. So that's one thing that we could use as a policy or procedure within our A1 assessment. So I'm going to click on that. And it brings you up quite a wordy document where it looks at the fact that, personal and emotional relationships with people, that sense of learning, teamwork, community, relationship building, friendship, social groups, and all of those sorts of things are valued within the curriculum because they are embedded within there. It's not just the academics. So we're actually looking at, is self-management, self-awareness, social management, and social awareness within the actual confines of the curriculum itself. And it breaks it down into these different points of view, where if I click on self-management, you can see that we're getting children to express emotions appropriately, develop self-discipline and set goals, work independently and show initiative, and become confident, resilient, and adaptable. So this is evidence here that policy and procedure, curriculum-based stuff that's coming from the government, is supporting us in being able to get children to become self-aware and self-manage so that they can become ultimately successful learners. If you look within the FISO stuff, which is very prominent within Victorian schools at the moment, it's a framework for improving student outcomes, and there's a whole section on student engagement and being connected and how important it is to build those relationships with people and how it affects you. If I click on my next tab, I've got the overview of the early years learning framework, which you could also use as a policy and procedure within your A1. And even from each of the outcomes, you can see that there's a strong basis. I don't really like using the term behaviour management side of things, but it is to do with social and emotional well-being. It's not just about academics either. So we want students to have a strong connections with, others within their group. You want to have a strong identity of yourself. You want to, obviously foster that responsibility in managing your own self. And there's lots of evidence within the early years learning framework. You could go straight to outcome number 3, where you've got a strong sense of well-being, and I'm sure that you'll find an example in there. This last framework that I wanted to show you is basically the PDF of the Safe Schools program. You could use that as your policy and procedure that you could show, scrolling down quickly. We've got these 9 elements, and they all revolve around the same sort of ideas that we've all been having a look at, and the fact that we want to accept responsibility for developing in a safe and supportive environment for children. You've got to have a connectedness to school, you've got to have a connectedness to staff, you have to show respect. There's so many, all of these little dot points can give you something that you can quote and something that you can use to show that teachers are supported in being able to help kids to better control emotions, better interact with other students, better engage with learning, engage with others, and therefore ultimately to improve their own learning outcomes for themselves. So that's that's the Safe Schools framework. There's quite a few things on the net that you can have a look at, but I didn't want to go too far off track from week 2, so that's just a bit of an overview. So we will have a discussion this week about theories and what you think of the quote. It's a great way to get help with your assessment 1. Thank you for being so participatory, I think is a word I was looking for. No, not really. Thanks for jumping in and being in the DB with me this week. It's been great.